So there's a difference of opinion in respect to the most beneficial use case for Gen AI within the telecommunications industry. The GSMA reports that 66% of communication service providers favor network troubleshooting, while Omdia, Analyst House, suggests that the top use cases are actually in and around customer interactions, such as chatbots, call centers. So which is it? Is it one or the other? Maybe it's both. I'm here with Giles Heron and with Sam Samuel from 4MC Partners to discuss this and the findings in their new paper, A Short Look at the Impact of AI on Telcos, which has been published ahead of this year's Mobile World Congress taking place next week in Barcelona. So, Sam, can you give us a quick overview of the paper that you've published? As I understand it, this is really intended for senior leaders, and these are busy people. So, what are they going to learn from this paper?
Okay, that's a phenomenally good question. So, when I first started to look at what the paper needed to have in it, a lot of it was around, well, how much do we commonly know about AI and how it's applied to CSPs? And it became quite evident that there's a fair amount of noise out there, which is generally given to us by all of the press around ChatGPT. So the question was, well, okay, how much does ChatGPT actually help anybody in the communication service provider industry? So the question started there, and then very quickly realized that there are various kinds of AI models out there, foundational models that could be applied to the industry itself. So the paper takes you through at a very high level. What is a foundational model? Then it looks at how the foundational models could be applied into this particular industry, communication service providers. And then from there, it becomes apparent it can be applied in one of two directions, either inwardly, so that we are applying the AI to optimize how the communication service provider's network is functioning, and outwardly, which is how does it address its customer relationship management issues, which is what the Omdia piece was actually trying to say, that's the one that most people in most industries are using AI for, because it seems to be a natural thing. Chatbots, all that kind of stuff, is human interaction, not necessarily network interaction. And then the paper then goes on to say, well, hang on a minute. There has been an awful lot of technology driven into the industry over the past 30, 40 years. Every 10 years, there's a new cycle of generation coming in. We're on the fifth one. Will we ever get to the sixth one? Who knows? But the point is that each generation says that this network's going to become simpler, and it isn't simpler. It tends to complicate things a good deal. And so when we're looking at AI, does the confluence of the new technology coming in plus AI make for a better network? Question number one. And two, does it actually say, well, I'm going to use the network more, which is what the communication service providers really want. They want to see a rise in ARPU. We are seeing a rising ARPU, which is also mentioned in the paper, which is interesting, but not because of 5G. We're seeing a rise in ARPU because the good folks in various mobile operators are realizing that they are a channel for other people to bundle subscriptions together, and their ARPU is rising because of better bundling, not necessarily because the network is giving them genuinely wow services because new generations come in. Okay, we'll reserve judgment on this because maybe we're still a bit too early to say that. But the point is, it's a business. It's not a technology. So how does AI help the business? That's the fundamental point of the paper, and it can help it in one of two directions. Either inwardly, can I make the network work better and more efficiently? And outwardly, can I provide a better service towards my subscribers? That's what the paper does.
Now, given the investigation that you've done, given the research you've done, if you had to kind of look forward, what do you think the AI models have the potential to offer in respect to specifically the operations within CSPs in, let's say, the next 3 to 5 years? Are we done? Do we understand it?
No, we're not done. Do we understand it? Sucks teeth, sort of, I think, right? So first off, let's get the elephant into the room, and let's go and see if we can feel its ears for a minute, right? So here we go. The AI we have right now is not the AI we're going to have in 5 years' time. Just get that out there. I think Giles and I have been looking over the learned journals and the published articles, and the output in this area is phenomenal, right? It's grown exponentially over the past 18 months that we've been looking at it. It is insane the amount of progress that they're making, right? So that makes me think that, and by the way, as each of these papers come out, they're all addressing a particular point in generative AI that they're trying to improve on, right? So now you're getting to I want to make this bit better, I want to make that bit better, right? Overall, these things will come together and make something better. And in 5 years, it's going to be very, very different. Now, the nice thing about these generative models is they are general in a sense, right? They're a general, I wouldn't say general AI because that's a confusing term because that make it more human, but let's say that they are very good at average behavior, right? So where the differences are is how can those models be impedance matched to the data which makes an enterprise unique and not leak that data, right? I think that's what's going to be the thing that a lot of small companies out there, a lot of startups out there are trying to achieve that through things like RAG and stuff like this, right? Now, as that matures, will that impact where CSPs will be? Yeah, I think it will, but there's also a massive hurdle that needs to be overcome. It's a bit like CSP is taking the training wheels off automation. So there is automation in the industry today, a lot of it, but now you're really saying, I'm going to take my hands off the controls entirely and let this thing run it. And that, I think, makes people a little bit nervous. So while AI improves, will it be adopted in the same way that's being adopted into into customer relationship management? And I have, as Giles and I were joking before we started recording this, we don't want a Canadian Airlines problem, Air Canada problem, right? Where we let a chatbot loose, it provides a brand new policy for the airline that it didn't even know of, and then it has to actually uphold that new policy in front of its customers, right? So given that example, I think we have a way to go. Right? I'll leave it there for now. Charles, anything else you want to add on that one? Because you've been chuckling about this in the background.
You mostly stole the thing I was going to talk about, the Air Canada thing. But yeah, I think that's it. It's balancing this sort of generative ability to hallucinate. And I may be going on to the next question a bit, Joel. But there you go. With accuracy. And I think what we've realised is that both in the kind of network optimization space and in the more sort of customer relationship management space, which can broadly be seen as that kind of reducing your costs or sort of improving customer retention and that sort of thing. So, in a sense, bottom line, top line. I think we've seen that there is that need for both accuracy and the creativity, and the problem is how do you get both? And Joel, if you remember back a few months to when we were playing with Python programming, that has a reasonably big corpus that generative AI can use, and yet it still makes mistakes.
So let's pick that up then. So if we're looking at that particular area, right, that combination of automation and AI as part of that automation, as you're saying, it's not without its pitfalls. So how should CSPs be thinking about that, particularly in the light of the concept of hallucinations, where is do you want creativity or do you want reliability and accuracy? Which one do you want? What's your thought?
I think I would come back to in terms of where the challenge is, at least, I'd come back to our colleague Jeff's favourite 2x2 matrix, as all good MBAs work with. And I think there are two sort of dimensions here. One is the size of the corpus you're dealing with. As I say, at least with Python programming, there's a very big corpus of information that ChatGPT SL can scrape because everything's on GitHub. Python's an incredibly common language, particularly open source new stuff. And then I think in the other dimension is your need for accuracy. And I think you could say that for sort of human pros in general, very specific accuracy isn't needed. And modulo this issue of please don't invent new policies on the fly, I like that chatbot. But of course, where programming is concerned, you really do need accuracy. If you put the bracket in the wrong place, the damn thing doesn't work. So I think that's broadly the challenge. And I think when you start trying to balance accuracy and creativity. I think that's where you get into also this problem of the foundational models, that the ChatGPTs that are, as Sam said earlier, very general, very large, billions of parameters, and yet the two things they lack is the specialization for the specific problem domain you're looking at, and the other is having the accurate, up-to-date data, because they, as we say in one of our papers, it's like an insect frozen in amber. It's frozen at that point. And of course, the last X months since the model was trained, things have changed. But I think more critically, of course, the thing is you need access to your own data. So not the publicly available data. So back to the programming example, there's an awful lot of Python code out there. There's probably not so much COBOL code out there because it's probably not in the public domain. And if you have a huge COBOL code base of your own, you'd probably want to throw that into your model, because that's how you get accuracy there. And I think that's where we get into these debates that we've been having around fine tuning of models versus building your own model, which is, I guess, the extreme case. But then back to the other side, the sort of easiest solution is RAG, so retrieval augmented generation. So building a vector database where you can have your own private data, and then when it comes time to ask a prompt to that foundational model, appending your private data to that prompt, having searched to find the most relevant private data to match that prompt. And I think that's probably what we'll see. But I think that doesn't solve, or it helps, it ameliorates, but you still have this fundamental issue that you're never going to achieve 100% accuracy combined with creativity. Again, in a bit of a sort of two-dimensional thing, it's very hard to go up and to the right. And so I think that's where we'll classically, particularly in network operations type instances, see humans verifying everything before you apply it, because otherwise
or again, there may be a bit of an over rotation by the industry to presume that Gen AI solves everything. So Gen AI is a useful tool, and let's not understate that. It is a useful tool, but AI has been applied into the industry for quite some time, right? So you have other AI systems out there that have been used, I guess, for the past 10, 15 years or so, right? So these tools aren't necessarily going to go away because they've been actually trained specifically on something, right? So in the course of our own investigations, we've come across people who are using specific bits of AI. So I would say image recognition being one of them, where we're using image recognition on a wiring loom to ensure that the wiring is done correctly, things like this. There's no generative aspect of that at all. It's not going to come back with a pretty blue color or something new. It's just trying to confirm that the wiring that you think you've got in place is in place. That's what we call traditional AI, I guess, now. Right? It's not the modern AI, the generative AI, that kind of stuff. So that's, I think, that's not going to go away. And maybe that's how we get to something which is not so hallucinative. We put the magic mushrooms away for the Gen AI for a while, and then we're trying to say, okay, this is something that we can trust. And there are other systems out there that have been used for quite some time. Expert systems are another one, right? That's another form of AI that can be used in this. So where our curiosity is going is how much of that can we mix and match. So if we have RAG, which is a retrieval augmentation system, right, then what is the system it's retrieving from, right? And so can that be a traditional AI system that adds in a wealth of stable information into the network, and then can that be used in conjunction with a generative thing to try and figure out what the problems are in the network, and so on and so forth. The same is also true for the outward side of AI. There's been recommendation systems used for, I was going to say millions of years, but that's not true. It's been used for the past few years, where AI is being used to recommend things to a subscriber, right? That may not necessarily be generative based, and again, that system tends to work quite well. Again, can you introduce it in a retrieval augmented way to the generative systems as well? Where it becomes more interesting is getting a holistic view of something now. So the Gen AI is general enough to go across the top of many AI systems. I think that's where it's likely to go.
So
If it
really,
goes,
in case of combinations of tools, it's not just one.
that's it.
It's a series of different tools, and really the case of picking the right tool for what you're trying to achieve, or the combination of tools.
Yeah, or you've figured out a way that you can prompt the Gen AI to pick the right tool at the right time, that kind of thing, right? So there's that option available, which Giles and I are trying to investigate our way through right now, right? But that's the allure of what it could do,
Right.
But there's the stability, again, for an industry like CSPs. Stability is an important thing in the network, right? Because they want to get to the point where they're running the network hot all the time, so they're not wasting resources and not having to buy more resources, right? That's the optimization curve that they're in right at the present moment. And maybe having a holistic view across the entirety of everything, which is what the allure of Gen AI enabled systems does, allows them to get that complete view. And then they can run the network much better, satisfy the kinds of services they can create and running the network much better, satisfy their consumer base much better, and so on and so forth, right? So that once you get the holistic view, then that becomes a different ballgame. But are we there? Yeah. Are we there? Back to the 5-year question. I don't think we're anywhere close to that today. From the research paper output, RAG is flavor of the month, and it will be for a while because of everybody spotted that, whatever you train the Gen AI system on, it's frozen in amber at that time, and you've got to apply more modern or more relevant, more recent information in somehow, hence RAG, right? So everybody's trying to go down that particular route. It's an interesting one. So in 5 years, will that be different? Hell yeah, I think that's going to be very different.
Yeah,
so Giles,
I was going to say there's some interesting stuff here. I was thinking earlier as Sam was talking about, networking and generations and 10-year cycles, and of course the internet wireline person in me was thinking, he's talking about mobile and only mobile, and I think the interesting thing there is to think, Joel, back to what we've seen in our careers in the internet and in telcos going back decades. What were the problems people were always trying to solve? And so the first thing Sam was just talking about, running your network hot. Of course, there was that great quote about the reason all these QoS mechanisms have been invented but rarely deployed is because basically smart people are more expensive than bandwidth. And I think to Sam's point, what people are trying to do is find AIs that, back to AGI versus specialized stuff. Well, it is quite specialized in this case. It's taking sort of the human expertise that would enable you to run the network hot and automating that. And so that's an interesting avenue because, as Sam says, if you can run the network more heavily utilized, but still have reliability and still not need a huge number of humans to operate it, that's got to be goodness. I think the other area that immediately springs to mind in terms of AI operationally is the classic one of fault determination. And I remember way back in the 90s, and we were trying to do cross-vendor fault correlation, and it was very much an expert system type approach, as Sam was talking about earlier. But the problem was the sheer number of systems you were trying to integrate and the sort of level of expertise required. And so more automated ML-based machine learning correlation feels like a more natural thing, and I'm sure a lot of that's already out there. And as I say, that's not all that generative, is it? It's taking all of your data and trying to figure out what it means. Yeah. And so again, you're in quite a niche, specialized bit of human expertise there.
So here's back to the 5-year question again, Joel, because it's a fantastic question, right? Because you can spout off anything and say it's going to happen in 5 years' time or 10 years' time, right? But the interesting thing is, all right, so throw out a new term for this particular podcast that we've got right now, which is collaborative AI, right? So once we've got systems that are AI systems are expert in a particular area, and to get the holistic view, that means you must be sharing that expertise between them. Then sharing it to a third party is not beyond the wit of man, right? So can we share that securely? So can it work with a competitor network to resolve boundary issues, configuration issues, without you having to intervene, things like this? I think that's the utopian goal where it may be going. And then the next thing is, can that also be applied on the customer relationship side of things? Well, if you're a channel for subscription, then your customer's customer is also part of being your customer base. And do you want to help solve your customer's problem? Right, ad infinitum. You could do that all the way back up. And you've got these systems to actually interact in that way. Yeah, probably you could, lower the lights, squint a bit in a few years' time. Yeah, I think that may be where we could head with this. Now, again, back to the feet on the ground. Are we there yet? No, we're not.
So Giles,
we can cheat on homework essays really, really well, but that's I think we're quite a way away from doing things like that. Not that we won't, but I think we're a way away from that yet.
So Giles, in the findings in the paper, kind of show a contrast between the customer service applications and the network operations side of AI. So if we think about the customer service aspects, is it just about chatbots? Chatbots does your Air Canada? No, never mind Air Canada. Is it just about chatbots, or is there more to it?
I think there has to be more to it, and I think back to what we were saying about RAG. If you think about it, one of the great abilities of generative AI is that human conversation layer, which is the classic chatbot thing. I think we've all used effectively the expert system type chatbots that our favorite internet service providers might operate, where you type who you are and you end up feeling like you've actually typed the same data in multiple times, and it's pretending to wait to give you an answer, which surely should be instant because it's just an expert system. And eventually you start typing stuff like, I just want to talk to a human. And so there has to be some progress beyond that. But it's clear, companies put those in place and they make it incredibly hard for you to talk to a human because it costs them money every time that happens. And the old adage about, one support call loses you all your profit for a mobile subscriber or a broadband subscriber for that month. So don't do it. And so I think the question then is, well, how do we make a chatbot, again, that's good enough at the prose piece to have a conversation with a human, but yet doesn't hallucinate and invent new company policies? So I think you do have to set quite tight bounds around it. But I think the other piece could be the RAG piece in terms of, could you personalize that chatbot so it actually knows, it doesn't think this is just generic subscriber coming in. It actually knows very quickly from those first few questions, I guess that you ask, which at any rate would be in the context window of the LLM. But can it then go off and look at the vector database and see what is the history of this customer, Giles Heron?
Right.
How many times has he called in? What exact package is he on? How long has he been a customer? What do his usage patterns look like? Where is he in the network? And what do we know about outages that might have happened in that part of the network? So can you use that personalization to get to a more accurate and hopefully then helpful conversation with that person without bringing in a real human at great expense?
Yeah. So this kind of brings up another point that, again, as part of our careers, we have seen increasingly, which is the hoarding of data, right? So everybody started they knew for some obscure reason they couldn't really put their finger on, it's best that we find out how the network is working by sampling how the network is working. So we get log files for absolutely everything. Now you've got all these log files. Now you've got this Gen AI thing. And you're going, well, I got this and I got that. Well, is it possible now to start doing things that I couldn't do before? So the aspirational hope of logging everything with the idea of getting to automated fixes for networks or automated recommendations for a consumer that you're trying to retain, all of that, I think, is becoming much more realistic and much more refined in the way that we can use the data. Ultimately, what's happening is a triage, either inwardly or outwardly. Whichever AI you pick, you're triaging, right? Either you are trying to make the network work as best as it can with as little effort as possible. That's a form of triage, meaning if it's a real big problem, I'll go away and do something about it. But if I can fix it without doing an awful lot to it, then I'll do that. If I can automate that, that's a big win. The same thing back to the consumer side of things, right? So if I can get to a good answer that the subscriber is happy with and then goes away without having to get in touch with the human, that's also a big win. And I think that's the sort of immediate hope that I think we're seeing in the conversations that we're having with people. That's what they want to aim for right now. Some of those things. So back to the 5-year view, if if that works over the next couple of years, then you can see how the people build on that, right? And then you start to see, well, if that bit works, then can we stretch it again and do it a bit more? The one thing that I think we are going to see is that it'll become like breathing. So in other words, well, you don't think about breathing too much, right? So, and if you did, you'd probably die. But the point is that if AI fulfills its promise, it's going to disappear into the noise. You're not going to be aware that it's there, right? And if that happens, then I think we will probably say it's a success.
Right. So that is a great place to park that one for the moment. But Sam, the paper also is talking about something very interesting, which is ARPU, so average revenue per user, which for a long period of time had kind of been heading downward. You see many reports about the value going downward. Appears to be, in some cases, reversed. That trend is being reversed and actually increasing. So can you talk some more about this, and where does AI come into that aspect? What's causing this reverse?
Okay, so all right, this is a bit like the holy grail and elixir of life we're going to talk about right now. Right? So I think it's fair to say that for many years, ARPU has been in decline across the industry. Right? So it didn't really matter which region you looked at. The amount of subscriber wallet share that you were getting was declining, right? Well, yeah, and that's due to competitive pressures being one of them. So in order to get in a saturated market, in order to get more subscribers onto your network, you have to do something to take them away from somebody else, and that usually ends up in a price war. Price wars tend to titrate towards zero, right? So that's why the ARPU has gone down. And then in order to entice someone to move to your network, you offer more for less, right? Okay. Now, I'm going to say something a bit provocative now. That's what a utility does, right? So you look at a CSP from a utility point of view, it's getting towards that phase of its life where it's a very good utility. I run a network, particularly efficiency. I provide bandwidth to subscribers, and that's it. I don't do more than that. What's starting to appear now is that another pressure is appearing, which is the subscriber is also trying to optimize their wallet, meaning I have 100 subscriptions. And we've seen this as well in other startups that are out there. There are a couple out there that are trying to take care of your subscriptions for you, trying to get better deals for you, right? So yes. It's now top of mind, right? So if your subscriber is trying to optimize their wallet through subscriptions, but you're part of the food chain, then why not try and optimize subscriptions for your customer as well? So you become a channel for subscription-based services. Ultimately, and this is a realization, I guess, what was it? My wife came up with an observation that I thought was like, well, why didn't I think of that? Today, you need, for anything to work on anything, right? Your laptop, your phone, your iPad, or whatever, you need connectivity, right? The problem is when there's a connectivity issue, most subscribers don't think about, well, let me look and see if it's my house network that's the problem. The first thing they do is they ring up the CSP and say it's your problem, which evidently it's not, right? But right there's a relationship that's there, right? Is the first port of call for the network error, I can't get my thing to work, is I ring up the CSP. With AI now, the CSP can actually say, well, hang on a minute, maybe I can look into this for you. It requires a bit more than just me saying, yeah, okay, I've got access to the home network and things like that. Set that aside for a minute. But the fact is, the conversations occurring between the subscriber and the CSP about a networking problem that is related to how the other applications on the device that the subscriber has happens to be working at the time. And it's probably nothing to do with the CSP's network at all, but it's a touch point for why isn't this application working, which is a customer's customer problem. So if you're acting as an aggregation point for subscription, then can AI help that food chain in its entirety? So can I add more subscribers into the subscription that my subscriber pays. So it's not just a connectivity subscription to a CSP, it's also connectivity subscription to Disney Plus, to something else, right? So, and then you can start adding onto that, what's the next subscription I can bundle in, and so on, right? For the third party that's coming in, that person has a lower cost of customer acquisition. There's a win there, right? So that's if the network is working supremely well and there are no issues, and the CSP can go and help resolve these issues on behalf of the subscriber and the owner of that subscriber, I'll use the term owner loosely here, meaning the application owner of it, then there's another business that can develop now that I think CSPs have been trying to for quite a while, right? But now this actually helps them an awful lot. Notice I haven't mentioned 4G, 5G, or 6G in any of this. This is just about customer relationship management and the fact that the CSP is in the middle of that.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point, isn't it? Because you start to think that instead of it being a communication service provider, CSP might actually stand for customer service provider. And the question then becomes, do they even need to be the owner of the network? They can be the owner of the customer, but what other things in terms of the bill, but what else do they need to own? And I think, as you say, the sort of the home networking piece is an obvious point of understanding of what's going on. I think the other thing, though, to be aware of in all of this is that while these sort of trends might have arrested ARPU decline, of course, reality is that if you get to a point where each household has one bill that includes their fixed broadband, all of their mobile subscriptions for the household, and all of their streaming TV subscriptions, that while the ARPU for the whichever CSP wins that business is good, of course, the revenue across the industry, the total revenue of all users for all services, isn't helped by that because you actually have fewer and fewer customers to share between all of these different providers. But I guess that also then, as I say, I think that then gives you the competitive angle that if you can be the best at doing that, you can be the one that wins those customers.
Okay, so I'm going to need to draw this to a close shortly. Giles, one last question. So looking forward, how do you see AI shaping the strategies of service providers? What are the key considerations that they need to keep in mind to ensure that AI initiatives are going to be successful and really, think about this in the long term in respect to the benefits it delivers? What do you think?
I think it's a tricky one, and I think as Sam was saying about the 5-year view, it's hard now to project exactly where all of this stuff will end up. So Gen AI is very much the thing du jour, and within that, RAG is very popular right now. But those things might change. I think from a service provider point of view, and again, as Sam said, this stuff will to an extent disappear. But I think that's perhaps an interesting point in that the same with the internet, any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic, but equally any sufficiently deployed technology becomes invisible. And so most people don't think about how their internet works, and the same way most people won't think about how the AI works, but most people. So somebody has to think about that. So a CSP has to think about how the network operates. And if that thesis is right, that CSPs are really about customer service and billing to some extent, rather than running networks, or those are two slightly different roles that very often are the same organization, but don't necessarily need to be, then I think on that customer service side, clearly there's going to be a role for very deep understanding of AI, very deep understanding of how do you automate that high touch, personalized customer service. And so I think that has to be their focus in terms of AI. I think on the more network operations side, I think the focus there has to be on this relentlessly reducing costs on, whether that's figuring out how to run the network hot with the minimum number of staff, whether it's figuring out how to minimize the number of faults. That's really where they need to be focusing. But in terms of strategy, I think that's an interesting challenge because neither of those organizations up to now have been AI experts. That's not their bread and butter. So I think initially, at least, there's a need to bring that AI expertise in. But I think we could see over time, and again, as we don't know right now, we're at the fairly early stages of this movie, or if it's a play, we're just sort of at the end of Act 1 of of generative AI, and we don't yet know how Act 3 turns out. And so I think at this point it's wise to sort of hedge your bets a bit and say, okay, let's maybe get some expertise in. Let's start to learn about this technology, but let's not throw everything after it. Let's not try and completely pivot our organization to be an AI organization, only to find that perhaps wasn't the ball we should have been watching. And I think this is always the challenge, isn't it, when a new tech arrives, is how much of your effort do you throw behind that new tech? Because you always get the hype cycle curves, and we know we're right up here at the moment. We know that there probably will be some kind of downturn, but equally there will be that plateau of productivity or whatever it's called. And you do want to leverage that. So you never want to be too early to move or too late. It's just a really hard balance. And I think particularly where it's a tech you don't really understand, gosh, that's hard to figure out.
So Sam, Giles, thank you very much for your time. Sam, where can people learn more about this paper?
Obviously, you go to our website, which is4mcpartners.com. No, it's not 4mcpartners.com. It's 4MC Partners. That newer business, right? 4MC Partners.
It can be both.
You can get this paper from 4MC Partners. Look on the web, look it up. It's there. If you want to know more about it, email us at info@4mcpartners. So you can get us multiple ways. Or if you happen to run into us at MWC, you'll find me. I still look the same wherever I go. So you can try and tap me on the shoulder and have a discussion there if you wish.
Fantastic. Sam, Giles, thank you very much for your time.
Yeah, thanks.